Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, from the global Prime community. It's an honor for me to introduce this session, Connecting Leading Youth Networks to Drive Global Systemic Change. My name is Paulus Pironi, and I'm the coordinator of Youth Leadership and Innovation at the Prime Secretariat. In this role, my primary mission is to lead the Prime Global Students, or only PGS, a network by and for students launched in the last year's Prime Global Forum, which is celebrating its first anniversary on this year's forum. PGS is one player in an entire ecosystem of students and youth-centered global network. They are driving change towards sustainability and responsible management education around the world. These youth-led networks take impactful action every day to transform today's world for the betterment of tomorrow's society. This session aims to get together impactful youth networks around the world to discuss how structured cooperation is a mark of youth agents and a driving force to lead our global society towards systemic change in the next 15 years. For this task, I'm honored to have leaders of influential students and youth organizations sharing this virtual stage with me. Today, Prime is thrilled to welcome Abdullahi Alim, leader of the Davos Lab at the World Economic Forum and manager of the WEF Global Shapers community. Darija Miletic, co-president of Oikos International. Maxime Lakat, executive director of Regeneration. And Robyn Fehrman, president and CEO of Enactus. We will start our session by doing a round of opening remarks from each of our guest speakers, and then we will lead our conversation to an open debate on connecting leading youth networks to drive global systemic change. By the end, if we have time, we will bring some questions from the audience to our open debate. So if you are watching us, please feel free to write any questions you might have on the chat whenever you want. In alphabetic order, I will introduce and let's start with the opening remarks. So let's start by Abdullahi Alim. Abdullahi Alim is an award-winning community organizing who leads the Davos Lab at the World Economic Forum. He is also a policy and an impact aggregator for nations seeking to rebuild post-pandemic systems with young people and their unborn generations in mind. The Davos Lab is the world's first youth recovery efforts premised on the viewings, ideas, and concerns of 2 million young people from around the world. Abdullahi, thank you so much for joining us today. I will start with a question so we can listen your open remarks. So the WEF Global Shapers is a network of young people driving dialogue, action, and change. How do you enable today's largest youth population in history to come together, take action, and shape policy making towards big, challenging, and global issues? Thank you so much, Abdullahi.
Thank you so much, Paulo, as well, for the invitation. And really, what a time for us to have this conversation too. Just for more context on my part, I lead and have led an initiative called the Davos Lab. And as Paulo mentioned earlier, it's our attempt as an organization to develop a recovery plan for future generations. When I say future generations, I don't mean that as a description. I mean that in the literal sense, the children yet to be born, those who will be born after this pandemic. What will it take for us as generation of today to be good ancestors and to make sure that we present a world for them that protects and safeguards their lives and livelihoods. The way we did that is we created a wide net of dialogues and surveys around the world. And these surveys involved young people who lived, for example, amongst the Amazonian nations in Brazil, to undocumented migrants living in some parts of the Middle East, to young people in sub-Saharan Africa, in Afghanistan during the peak of its sort of more recent demise in the last year, to Ukraine, to all pockets of this world. We, in fact, I think covered about 183 countries, 183 cities, sorry, from our last recollection. And as much as we led this effort to think of ways in which we could reimagine a better world, a better norm, we also championed something called a Millennial Manifesto. And that was really about getting young people to ask themselves critically, what are the ways in which we perpetuate inequality in our activism, in our very own activism, even as we seek to end inequality in the wider world? It was a provocative question, and intentionally so, because that question was designed to get young people to think through all the ways in which they are not reaching the full maximum potential of systemic change. And there were some very profound ideas that came about from those exercises that we led across the world. Number one, more and more youth movements, more and more youth organizations want to spend more time diagnosing as opposed to just simply solving problems. It might seem counterintuitive to focus less on the solution than the problem itself. But really, to be honest, we're contending with very complex social, environmental, and political problems in today's world. And as you wouldn't, for example, go to a doctor and have them perform an operation without them having a thorough understanding of the human body, we also think that logic, that ability to diagnose, that the appreciation of the problem itself is something that's lacking in our sector, and something that we want to also make sure that more and more young people truly understand how to sort of go about that. The second one is knowing when it is, how important it is to work at the systems level. When you are developing a solution, when you get to that stage where you understand a problem critically and you want to then take action, you have two options. You could either stay in the periphery and do the work which sometimes gets, unfortunately, more public attention, more public interest, or you could do the work that is really tackling the core political and cultural factors that uphold an inequality to start with. And for us, when we were going through 2020 as a community, this is now the Global Shapers community, we had to contend with one difficult fact. In 2020, we were just 1 year shy of celebrating our 10th year anniversary. And we had to go back to 2011. What caused us really to start? What really was the driving reason for us to be created in the first place? And that was because of the 2008 financial crisis. It was because of movements like the Occupy Wall Street example. It was because of movements like the Arab Spring that really were coalescing around this idea of mass economic anxiety on the part of young people, that the World Economic Forum thought it made absolute sense, and rightfully so, to bring more young people and organized examples of young people to the decision-making tables of this world. And as much as we've made tremendous growth in the last 10 years and great examples of projects that we've helped to support around the world, the unfortunate truth is that the world has only gotten worse. The climate crisis is far more urgent today than it was in 2007. I think there was very little effort taken to ensure that economic inequality no longer becomes embedded in our political systems. And so in many ways, we had to contend with the fact that as much as we've tried to do good work, the world has only gotten worse. And that takes us to this whole idea of what I started with in the beginning. It really comes down to understanding your ability to understand and diagnose social problems effectively, your ability then to create change at the systems level. And when I think of all the challenges that we have in today's world, a lot of them, unfortunately for the most part, are upheld by big business. And if I wanted to take a systems lens and think, where does this problem originate from? Unfortunately, I think there are examples to say that there are some ideas that are pre-exposed to business leaders of tomorrow at business schools of today. Whether it's being exposed to ideas which support neoliberal economics, which support shareholder primacy, or maybe just ideas that you're not exposed to. This idea of externalities, the idea where if you take, for example, a tax cut as a business, who then picks up that cost in other parts of our society? And so for me, it's now critically important that more of our youth organizations around the world to truly tackle economic inequality, to truly make sure that we champion stakeholder capitalism. We really need to go back to how we're educating our future generations about the business world of tomorrow. And that really starts at business schools. It seems like an unfair and difficult responsibility, but it's unfortunately the only chance that we have now to really take a long-term lens in really reimagining business. To reimagine business, we have to reimagine business education. And as a community, as global shapers around the world, we are really committed to this notion of understanding problems, trying to tackle issues at the systems level more and more effectively. And so it makes perfect sense for us to be part of this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Abdullahi, for these inspiring and provocative words. I totally agree with you on the call for young people to understand and diagnose the global issues and the role of business and in the systemic challenge we have, and the role of business schools on shaping the future of business. So we are fully connected. You mentioned Millennial Manifesto. I'm pretty sure that Maxime will talk about the manifesto he led in Canada. But now I would love to invite Darija Miletic to join the conversation. Darija is a co-president of Oikos International, a student-led non-profit network of student change agents working towards transforming management and economics education together. So we are linking with the final words of Abdullahi. Next to presenting Oikos, she is currently finalizing her students at the Faculty of Biology, focused on molecular biology and physiology in Belgrade. Being a big learner, she loves to explore the richness of our world and to dedicate her time to volunteering activities around sustainability, recycling, learning about biodiversity, environmental, and animal protection. She also has interest in human rights, building communities, and etc. A lot of interest, Darija. Darija, thank you so much for joining us today. Oikos is a long-standing partner of Prime and now from PGS. And Oikos is also a global community, but focused on student change agents, as I said, working towards transforming management and economic education for sustainability. How do you organize such a powerful student agency around such a critical mission?
Thank you so much, Paulo, for this lovely introduction. And as you mentioned, we are so close partners. I already had a few of my colleagues talking today on this great event on the Prime Global Forum. And thanks again for the invitation and the chance for me to give some insight in our world, in Oikos world, and what we actually do within our community, and exactly to respond directly to your question of how do we actually gather around our beautiful community. I have to say that we have been gathering Oikos community for 35 years this year. So it has been a long journey for us. And I would say that we have been gathering around very simple but very important actually question, which brings us to this systemic level of which Abdullah was mentioning all around the world. And that is, how do we actually want to learn, lead, and live together in this world? Kind of coming together with the same passion for change. The Oikos community has been gathering around transforming our own education and seeing highest value and a crucial point towards a world that we want to see. So our international initiatives aim actually to encourage and empower student change agents all around the world to transform and reimagine their curriculum and their own education, university ecosystems, and become the leaders that they want to see and that we need in the world. So it's a lovely community. It's a compassion. It's a drive for change, and it's something that we have been driving for 35 years. And I'm very proud to be and present in front of this community here today.
Thank you so much, Darija. Thank you. I'm not sure if I can call Oikos a young organization since it's 35 years old, right? But jokes aside, thank you so much for sharing such inspiring words. I do love the 3 L's, learn, lead, and live in that word together. So that's very inspiring. And also another thing that came to my mind is the word reimagine the curriculum and the education, right? That's very important. That's how we want to push our students. And the word reimagining connects me to our next guest speaker, Maxime Lakat, who is the founder and the executive director of Regeneration, Canada's largest organization dedicated to advancing sustainable business by amplifying youth perspectives and providing youth with the skills building and career resource. Regeneration aims to reimagine schools, repurpose careers, and remodel companies to be aligned with regenerative principles. In 2021, their One Future, One Business manifesto, I gave the spoiler, campaign became Canada's largest youth-led movement to change the way business is done and taught. Prior to this role, Maxime was the co-president of the Desaltos Sustainability Network, or DSN, at the McGill University, where he holds a Bachelor of Commerce in Sustainable Business Management and Social Entrepreneurship. DSN helped to co-organize the Montreal Youth Summit on Sustainable Business and many other events that reached thousands of students. DSN also worked at the academic level to improve McGill's business curricula and mainstream sustainability across all programs by work with professors, faculty leaderships, and professionals. Maxime, my dear friend, thanks for joining us today. Regeneration, previously known as the Canadian Business Youth Council for Sustainable Development, aims to bring human and ecological well-being to the center of every decision. Please tell us about how you conduct such a transformational change in Canada and how the world should be inspired by your achievements.
Thank you, Paulo. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I had forgotten how long the bio I had sent you was, so now I feel I have less things to say about what we do, given how much you've already said. But thank you so much for this opportunity. Yes, so we changed our name, as you have noticed before. We're the Canadian Business Youth Council for Sustainable Development, which was a really way too long name, impossible to remember, and now we're just Regeneration, to play both on the idea that the future of sustainability is a regenerative economy, but also to play on the idea that our generation is going to help to rethink society. Today, as you said, we're the largest youth-run organization in Canada dedicated to advancing sustainable business practices by amplifying youth perspectives and also equipping young people in Canada to really change their careers and also change the schools that they're part of. So today we are this very large organization. We're about to triple our staff actually this week to 10 paid staff. So we're really becoming a larger nonprofit here, but it wasn't always like that, right? And initially where this whole movement started was about 4 years ago, when I was the president, as you said, Paulo, of the Hotel Sustainability Network, which was basically the student organization in charge of sustainability at the business faculty at McGill University here in Montreal. And after a year of being the president of that student organization, I realized that there was no communication between the different student leaders of similar student organizations in sustainable business across the different business schools in Canada. There was just no communication, not sharing best practices between each other, no collaboration. Although we could, if we came together, which we eventually did, we could, lead to a lot of impact by advocating together. So that's where it initially started, this, realization that there's no communication, and creating this community of student leaders. And about a year after that, as you said, Paulo, we launched the Our Future, Our Business Manifesto campaign right at the beginning of the pandemic. So the timing was actually perfect when it came to rethinking society. And we co-created basically a 25-page manifesto with 65 youth organizations, not just student organizations, but also youth organizations or nonprofits with very different focuses. And we really wanted to get all the youth organizations in Canada to co-create a manifesto of what we would like to see as the future of business and the implications for business schools. At the end of that campaign, we had hundreds civil society organizations recognizing the need for business education because of our campaign, and also 130 high-level executive leaders, so mostly CEOs and vice presidents of companies who also recognize the need for change to happen in business schools. The manifesto is basically 20 key statements that represents the topic that we deem as the most important ones to talk about to shape a better future. We don't pretend to have all the solutions with that manifesto and don't necessarily want everyone to agree with every single point we made. However, we strongly believe that all the topics addressed in that manifesto should be consciously discussed in the business school community, because while some schools have been really innovating and doing great progress over the past few years, sustainability in the large majority of schools, even in some of the most progressive ones, and I'm really not trying to sell my university here, McGill University, who has been, very progressive on sustainability for years. My program, my bachelor program, was entirely dedicated to sustainable business management, right? Back then when I applied and I got into McGill, it was one of the very few programs around the world that had an entire business major entirely dedicated to sustainability and social entrepreneurship. So this is clearly a very progressive business faculty. And yet, even though the program is great, it's still just a minority of students who go through that program, right? And sustainability is still a bit siloed. We're improving, and McGill is definitely doing great progress. But we can see this trend in most business schools where sustainability courses are siloed and not integrated throughout all the programs in finance and marketing and accounting and all that. So I think, while there has been very positive progress, it's still a bit siloed. Key topics are often excluded. I really love the fact that Abdullahi mentioned, corporate taxes and the topic of the responsibility of corporations to actually pay their fair share of taxes and not just always doing tax evasion or tax optimization. And also the conversation sometimes on certain issues just doesn't go far enough. And that's what we try to tackle with our manifesto is, respond to the fact that sometimes the conversation, because it doesn't go far enough, sometimes ends up reinforcing some of the problems that we tried to tackle in the first place. So we see right now a big rise in responsible investment and sustainable finance. And while there are very, very positive things happening in that space, actually today, most of the conversation and most actions and efforts happening around sustainable finance could actually be considered as greenwashing, and there isn't standards enough that push the conversation further there. So we really need to be careful. So that's why we tried to do with that manifesto. Following the manifesto, we developed various resources for business schools, for faculty leadership, for professors, but also for local student leaders. And that aligns a lot with what Oikos International is doing. It's really to empower the local students at the local level to drive some change. So that's some of what we've done before that, that could be inspiring. And then also what we're doing is reimagined schools, as I said, and then repurpose careers. repurpose careers of young people, because I genuinely think there's a big loss of meaning in the new generations of business graduates, a loss of meaning in the traditional career path, where it just doesn't align with their values and their conviction about climate change, about inequality, and all these topics. But unfortunately, in terms of career development resources, young people are a little bit lost because they're not offered the support as to how to integrate sustainability into their career, actually. And I think, unfortunately, most career development centers and business schools right now around the world are not trained about how sustainability is relevant to each one of their programs on finance, on accounting, and all that. And I think there isn't enough training for career advisors in business schools to help students really navigate those difficult and complex questions. So we developed a lot of tools for that to compensate for that lack. We developed a lot of career development tools for young people, not just students, but all young people, to find a career in sustainability. But it won't reach everyone, right? So here, I'm hoping there are a lot of influential deans here on this session, and I really invite you to consider, putting a lot of resources into helping your career advisors understand, like, really in depth, all the trends around sustainability for their respective students. And I think that could really go a long way. So that's my little call to action to finish my opening words.
Thank you so much, Maxime. It's always very inspiring to hear the storytelling behind the Canadian Business Youth Council and now Regeneration. Congratulations on the scale up. I know how many efforts and energy you put on that. Congratulations, really. And it's so inspiring to see, like, how for a movement of advocacy together, the manifesto, 23 statements, 65 youth organizations, you're moving within and behind the schools, and now you are serving other players on that ecosystem, not only students with a focus on the students, but also equipping these students to be the driving force of change in Canada, right? Pushing and making sure that businesses are accountable and are definitely hearing their voice. That is very, very inspiring. So from this beautiful example of advocacy that is becoming more than only advocacy now, I want to listen now to another guest speaker, Robyn Fehrman, because she will bring a little bit more about entrepreneurship and youth entrepreneurship and the power behind it. So as president and CEO of Enactus, Robyn Fehrman is a results-driven nonprofit executive with 20 years of experience scaling impact enterprise to achieve systemic change. She joined Enactus after serving as manager director of the Center for Advancement of Social Entrepreneurship at Duke University Fuqua Schools of Business. Prior to work on Duke University, Fehrman led Teach for America, Eastern North Carolina, as executive director and held various roles at the local, state, and national levels, advancing philanthropy, economic development, and public health. Robyn also serves as a chair of the board of directors of Global Grassroots, a social enterprise working in East Africa to catalyze women and girls as the leaders of conscious social change in their community. Robyn, thank you so much for joining us today. Enactus' mission is to, quote, engage the next generation of entrepreneurial leaders to use innovation and business principles to improve the world. What is the role and potential of youth entrepreneurship in driving systemic change worldwide and shaping a better tomorrow for our planet?
Well, thank you, Paulo. It is such a pleasure to be here and to speak with you and the incredible fellow panelists that are part of this session. I started my career 25 years ago as a student leader and activist, and have continued that thread, and now get to help train the future generation of leaders who are truly going to change the world and already changing the world. So what we have seen at Enactus over our 46-year history is that youth entrepreneurship has the potential to create positive social and environmental change at scale. Enactus is the world's largest experiential learning network, preparing the next generation of leaders with the business and innovation skills needed to create a better, more sustainable world, and specifically needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Each year, we educate tens of thousands of students on 2,000 campuses across more than 35 countries around the world. Through our curriculum, our students annually launch about 3,000 entrepreneurial projects that are focused on positive impact. And just to give you a sense of the scale, in 2021, those student projects reached 11.6 million people. This isn't impact that's happening someday in the future. This is impact that happened in 2021. And through reaching those 11.6 million people, Enactus students who are in college and university helped to lift 531,000 people out of poverty. They increased access to healthier food for 1.3 million people. They eliminated 7 million tons of waste and reduced CO2 emissions by 546,000 tons. They impacted employment. They increased access to information. They improved health services. And so what we believe and what is clear from the data is that certainly student entrepreneurship is not only having an impact as we think about the future, but it is having an impact on the lives of millions of people right now. When we look beyond the immediate impact that young people are already having through these types of entrepreneurial enterprises that Enactus helps to cultivate, we also know, and what our data shows, is that the experience of students working as a team to develop and launch an innovation that solves a real problem, the experience of going through that ideation, problem identification, piloting, testing, prototyping, failing, that experience really has a lifelong impact on students. So through entrepreneurship-focused experiential education, like the type that we lead at Enactus, students are developing the future of work skills that the World Economic Forum is calling for all of us to do more on. And that those future of work skills and the ripple effects of using those skills help to create systemic change across sectors. We know that catalyzing student entrepreneurship in the college and university years is critical to building the future talent pipeline of globally informed and impact-minded leaders. So we truly know that that impact is happening both today and is building the pipeline of leaders that are needed for tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Robyn, for sharing such a remarkable and impactful work done by Enactus and all the students engaged all over the world. The numbers are really impressive, and congratulations for you, for your team, and for all the students around the world. It's very, very impressive and inspired, and I'm glad that you come to share with us this experience.
Absolutely. Me too. Thanks.
So I would kindly ask the producer to bring all of us together. We have about 10 minutes, and time flies when the conversation is good. But I would love to listen from final thoughts. And it's interesting because we prepared some questions for that debate part. And Jonathan Lowe, the chair of Prime Chapter UK and Ireland, is watching us. And he asked a similar question that we prepared, in terms that after listening to all these inspiring and purposeful actions from young people driving change around the world, what collaborations strategy can we, all these different youth networks, implement to connect and even more empower even more all these youth networks worldwide? Who wants to go first? Any ideas and insights?
Well, I'd be happy to share a quick thought, which is at Enactus, we really believe that competition is critical to spurring innovation, but it takes collaboration to actually scale impact. And so I think that what's incredible about networks, including all of the networks that are represented here, is they have the power to accelerate the pace of change when we do a great job of sharing lessons and innovation across boundaries so that we can all get better faster. I think that when we can foster collaboration and insight sharing both among networks and within networks, we can get better faster. We can more rapidly ideate, iterate, and learn because we know that the urgency of now is so real when we think about the immensity of the challenges that we're trying to solve and the work ahead of us to do as Abdullahi already said, to be better ancestors. So I think that networks have incredible power, but we have to work not just within them, but across them as well.
If I may follow that, because I do really resonate with what Robyn just said, we need to work across networks and take inspiration from leaders who are within different contexts, right? In our case, we actually took a lot of inspiration from an organization called Pour un réveil écologique. In French, in English, it's for an ecological awakening. They're based out of France. It's a student-led movement, and the work they've done over the past 3 years is just so inspiring, and they've really led the way, I think, at a global level, you know, in terms of what students are able to do when it comes to driving change in schools and curriculum, but also in the industry. And so we've been really looking, you know, up to them. We've had actually very close communication with them, learning from their best practices and making sure that here in Canada, we can take inspiration from what they've been doing in Europe and in France to really push the conversation further. Obviously, Darija from Oikos, right? We also take a lot of inspiration from Oikos International, since they've been paving the way for, I think, a few decades now. And it's not just been a few years, it's been almost decades, I think. So really ensuring that there are channels of communication between the different organizations that are represented today, but also outside of that, and learning from those, I think is a really important way to get inspiration.
I could just echo, if I may add, what Maxime just said. Yeah, it's already three decades. We are trying to create in Oikos. Actually, we are trying to create different platforms, and one of the platforms to actually come together with our partner and different youth networks that we are collaborating is, for example, the camp we are trying and prototyping from the last year, which actually creates a lab, and it's a place to accelerate the ideas that are already set in place, especially for transforming education, and to actually bring people together to co-create, to collaborate and inspire each other. Because it's not just exchanging the ideas and exchanging the information or something like that, but also exchanging this feeling of drive for a change. It's very inspiring, and it sometimes brings the spark that is the crucial part to actually continue and develop further any kind of project in the world. I think it's worldwide. And when you have this international platform, it even brings the diversity of like backgrounds, cultures, diversity of opinions, and we are all coming with very different mindsets, which you can actually then harvest from in a kind of a lab setting. Yeah.
And just to maybe close off, I completely back what each of the other panelists have already shared. I think as much as our mandates are quite large as youth organizations, we are limited by our own bandwidth and other constraints. So I think there's always a need for us to have like a convener of sorts to give us almost like a North Star to say, if you know, we've looked critically into, for example, youth activism or youth engagement, these are the trends that we are seeing. This is where we think we can have the most amount of impact. This is where we could make a dent. This is what's lacking. I think all of that is always super helpful, and it's not in our team, for example's immediate wheelhouse to be able to do that on top of like running the operation of itself, you know. So I think collaboration is super important, but as much as coordination is needed.
Perfect. I can agree anymore with each one of your statements. I think we are bringing different ideas for understanding the same challenge and finding. This is, again, as I said in the backstage, the first of many conversations. I do want to thank you all for welcoming PGS. It's the youngest of the youth networks here. Welcome PGS on the ecosystem, accepting our invitation. And I really agree that we should enable more convenient space, not only for cooperation, but for coordinator, as Abdullahi said, because although we have impactful programs and activities, we live in a world of limited resource. So we need also to be in a constant exchange of communication, exchange of tools, to avoid reinventing the wheel, avoid overlapping this resource, and being as much as efficient, since we share in different ways the same mission. So that's my call. I hope that we can have this conversation in other arenas, once in Enactus with Robyn, one time being welcoming by Darija in oikos, another with Maxime in regeneration, and Abdullahi in the World Economic Forum. Thank you so much again to you four. It was a pleasure, and I hope the audience enjoy as much as me. Thank you. Bye-bye.